What's up guys, it's Will back again, and today's review is The Legend of Tarzan. I've actually seen the first trailer for this movie like a million times because it played as the opening advertisement for like every movie I saw at my local Regal cinemas. And it was kind of like Independence Day, and then I saw the trailer for the first time and was like, that looks kind of shitty, but the more I saw it, the more I warmed up to it. But anyway, let's get into my review of The Legend of Tarzan. Okay, so The Legend of Tarzan is an action-adventure film that is based on the 24-part main Tarzan book series written by Edgar Rice Burroughs. The film was directed by David Yates and follows main protagonist John Clayton III, an Englishman who was actually raised by apes inside of the jungles of Africa. He also goes by the name Tarzan, obviously, which is his ape name because his father and mother died inside the jungle, and since he's an adult now, he had to be raised by someone, and that someone was the Mangani apes of the African jungle. The film takes place in the late 1800s, and Tarzan eventually leaves the jungle and heads back to England to live a much more normal life. But he's invited back to Africa to help achieve a trade of some sorts among King Leopold II and the Congo. Well, eventually he accepts the invite, and he and his wife Jane and Samuel L. Jackson's character George Washington Williams head to the Congo. They eventually cross paths with Christoph Waltz's character Captain Rom, who wants to deliver Tarzan to a local African chief in exchange for some extremely valuable diamonds that are buried beneath the land occupied by said tribe. I won't tell you why the chief wants Tarzan, but let's just say that it's very personal to him and he has a very deep hatred inside of him for Tarzan. Captain Rom eventually captures Jane and holds her hostage, and the rest of the movie is spent with Tarzan and George Williams attempting to locate Jane and bring her home unharmed, with the help of some of Tarzan's animal friends and some local African tribes who love him too. Okay, so I'm gonna have to say that I was really not a fan of this movie. On my ride home from the theater, I was trying to think about whether a Tarzan adaptation could actually work in 2016 or later, and I think it can. I asked myself that question because there were a lot of moments that are true to what Tarzan is as a character and as a story, but they felt really corny in this movie. I'm not entirely sure if Tarzan is just something that's outdated at this point, or if the movie executed these moments poorly, but either way, it resulted in my personal disappointment with this film. The first thing you probably want to know is whether Alexander Skarsgård is a good Tarzan. Well, yeah, I think he does a decent enough job. I thought he acted the role pretty well and did the best he could with what he had to work with. The problem is that the writers somehow managed to have Tarzan be a pretty bland character. For the king of the jungle, a guy that swings around from trees and fights apes and stuff, he's actually pretty underwhelming because he has no depth or layers, and he's not really all that exciting. His sole motivation in this movie is really finding Jane and bringing her home, and that's pretty much it. I think we're in a time where we're seeing crazier and crazier things in movies and TV, and the things that Tarzan does just aren't really that impressive anymore. Yeah, he swings from trees and stuff, and that's cool, but everything else he does kind of left me a little disappointed. He's a legend, but he doesn't feel like a legend judging by what they show you on screen. The name of Tarzan feels much bigger than what the actual Tarzan himself truly shows and is capable of. And if you're disappointed with your main protagonist and legendary hero, you're probably going to be disappointed with the movie. Like I said though, I don't blame Alexander Skarsgård for this. I blame the writing and action sequences mostly. I'm sure there's some people like my friend Kirsten, who I went to this movie with, who mostly want to see Tarzan because they think Alexander Skarsgård is hot. You might know him from his role of Eric Northman on True Blood, or oddly enough, his role of Meekus from Zoolander. The Meekus from Zoolander one is actually kind of crazy when you think about it. Like I said though, he does decent enough as Tarzan. Not great, not terrible, but solid. So Margot Robbie acted her part of Jane pretty well, but there were definitely some things that I didn't like about her character. For one, her Jane accent just felt kind of weird and unnatural. It sort of pulls you out of the story, because for me personally, I was thinking more about her accent than what her character was actually saying in certain moments. I actually watched a couple interviews with her before the movie came out, and I actually saw that she pushed for Jane to not just be a damsel in distress, but rather a capable and strong woman who holds her own. Well, the problem is that a damsel in distress is exactly what Jane is in this movie. I mean, she does a couple cool things here and there, but for her, the movie is mostly spent telling Christoph Waltz how terrible of a person he is, and how Tarzan is going to do terrible things to him when he finds him. She certainly seems capable, but you never get the chance to see her do anything of consequence because all that stuff is left to Tarzan and his male friends. So if you came into this thinking you'd get the next strong, capable female character like Ray, I'd say temper your expectations because the damsel in distress is exactly what Jane is in this movie. Both Christoph Waltz and Samuel L. Jackson are acted really well in this movie. I have to say that Samuel L. Jackson's character is the best one in this movie because he provides some much needed comic relief and some badassery as well. His character is a supporting one, but he's in a ton of the movie and I had no no problem with that because George Williams is just a really cool and capable character that works well in duo with Tarzan. The two are together for a lot of the film, and their interactions are usually pretty interesting and pretty funny. Christoph Waltz is the main antagonist, Captain Rom, is very well acted, but just like Tarzan, his character is sort of bland. He's just painted as this greedy bad guy who does bad things for the money, and he doesn't really have too much depth to him. He's just a bad guy for the sake of being bad, and he's not going to be a memorable villain for me that I really remember down the road. Christoph Waltz is a really great actor, and he does a good job in this role, but the role itself let him down in my opinion. Okay, so the story itself is very predictable and cliche with very little emotion wrapped up in it. The film does a really bad job of getting you emotionally invested in the story because you don't really get enough character interaction on a deeper level that allows you to build your investment as a viewer. You get some flashbacks into how Tarzan met Jane and stuff, but you don't get enough insight into their relationship and why she's so important to him other than the fact that she's his wife. By providing us more insight into these things, this would raise the stakes and the emotions of the film even further. And since we don't get a lot of this information, the whole movie is spent trying to chase Jane down, and when you rescue her, you don't feel that emotional weight like you should. Because when done correctly, you would feel uneasiness and fear for Jane when she's under the control of Captain Rom. But once the dust settles at the end of the movie, I personally didn't feel like a great feat was accomplished. It just felt like a spectacle with very little payoff. I did feel the film was beautiful to look at and the CGI animals looked pretty fantastic. The action scenes are cool to marvel at because they are definitely visually impressive. Not quite on the Jungle Book level, but still good. On the other hand, there were definitely some shots that were just jarring for me as a viewer because Tarzan would be like glowing in the sun or something else weird, and it just felt really forced. Also, there were times when the story progressed with little to no explanation. Like George Williams can't keep up with Tarzan because he's obviously much older, and they show you that, and then they show you a shot of the jungle to indicate a passage of time, and they're way further in the jungle with George right behind Tarzan. So you just showed me he couldn't keep up with Tarzan, but he kept up with Tarzan? And they don't ever explain how it happened, so as a viewer that's confusing because you showed me one thing and then showed me another thing with no explanation as to why it changed. Also, during the climax of the film, these animals join Tarzan in his fight against Rom and the English in general, and the only explanation you get is, well, he's king of the jungle. This film approached things from two extremes. They give you way too much info or not nearly enough. There's times where things happen unexplainably and you never get an answer as to why, and there's times when characters are just talking and they're spouting exposition uncontrollably and unnaturally. The dialogue as a whole is pretty solid, but at times the characters will just explain their backstories and some of their motivations to another character out of the blue. It doesn't feel like a natural unveiling of key character and story info. Instead, it feels like, oh shit, this isn't going to make sense if we don't explain that. Better throw that info in this scene. Overall though, I have to say that I was pretty disappointed in this film. I thought it had some good acting, entertaining and visually impressive action sequences, and good pacing. But sadly, it also had very bland characters, a predictable and cliche story, poor building of emotional investment, and excessive and unnatural exposition. I'm gonna give this movie a 5.5 out of 10 and say that you should save your hard-earned money and not go see this one in theaters. So did you guys see The Legend of Tarzan yet? What did you think of it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if not, let me know whether you're excited to see this film or not. And as always, if you like this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for future content like this. So that's gonna be it for the review, but there's one last thing I wanna talk to you guys about. I set up a Patreon page for those of you that like my reviews and wanna support this channel. I know it's always difficult to bring the topic of money up because it's awkward, but I won't be able to review every big release that hits theaters because I just don't have the money to purchase a ticket to every single one. A movie ticket these days costs around $15, and obviously I'm not making enough money to keep paying for these out of pocket. So if you ever feel the urge to support what this channel does, then there's a link to my Patreon in the description where you can donate, and I'll use that money exclusively to purchase tickets to movies for reviews. Thanks again for listening, guys. This is WillFoxification signing off. See you in the next review.